Okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to get started, so bear with me. We have a little housekeeping up first, and then we can get going. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1979 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the public meetings at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused this notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the board administrative offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough and the Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Peter, would you mind taking attendance?
Mr. Gilfillan. Mr. Arnick.
Here.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Here.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Ryan. Mr. Smith. And Ms. Weber.
Here.
8 present and accounted for.
8. Okay, so if you can, if you're able, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over by Dr. LaSousa. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Just a quick president's comment. As you noticed, we have a full house here tonight, and 8 is a full house because I have to sadly report that Mr. Valenti, Michael Valenti, who was one of the borough reps, resigned. He just had too many conflicts with his work schedule, and he just felt he couldn't, give it 110%. As much as I said, listen, we'll take 75%, he said, no, I really have to give it my all or not at all. So Mike Valenti resigned effective January 15th. So what happens next is anybody that's interested from the borough in filling his, I believe he has 2 years, roughly 2 years left on his term. If you're interested in filling the rest of that term, if you would just submit your name to either myself or Peter DeQuilla. The email is on the website. And we have 60 days, I believe, from probably January 15th to fill that spot. And typically what happens, the board, I don't know if folks know about it, but the board is made up of 5 members from the township and 4 residents from the borough. And that was established back in '86 when the schools merged and blah, blah, blah. So what happens is typically when there's a resignation, if it's a resignation in the borough, the remaining borough members will, meet anybody that has any interest and then select a candidate and present that candidate to the full board. If it's a township resident that resigns or there's an open seat, it's the township members that do the same. So if you're interested, please, send a letter of interest to either Peter or myself or the Board of Ed email address, which is on the main page. That would be great. The goal is to try and meet people in the next couple weeks and then get somebody on board either for February 1st or, today's February 1st, March 1st or March 15th. So thanks very much for that. Then I'm going to punt it right over to you, Dr. LaSousa.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Hope everyone made it in safely. Obviously, we've had nearly a historic storm here the last couple of days. I chose to keep the schools closed for a 3rd day just because there was so much snow to remove and buses having to make turns at corners and crossing walks that needed to be cleared all took a little bit longer than we would like. So that's why we were virtual today, and I checked in with all the principals. It seems that things went pretty smoothly today and yesterday in terms of virtual instruction, which is amazing when you think about it. A year ago, we couldn't have probably imagined having a blizzard and then having 2 days that could go without a hitch. So that's a testament to our teachers and our staff members who have kept kids plugged in and working even when we can't get outside and to school. At the last board meeting, I started with, kind of a state of the schools address, or at least the status of schools as it pertains to COVID. And I was quite optimistic at the time because our school nurses all had begun the vaccination process, and every indication was that New Jersey would move on to all of our other staff members relatively quickly as part of the Phase 1B group, and all of New Jersey's previous plans and publications indicated that school employees would be prioritized, really right at the front of the 1B category, ahead of folks who were 65 years and older and other groups. And then, of course, a few weeks ago, as you all know, Governor Murphy changed course, and New Jersey instead deprioritized school staff and put school staff behind individuals 65 years and older and adults between the age of 16 and 64 with other underlying conditions, including smoking addiction. So my optimism has waned a bit. I really had thought, and I had begun to engage our leadership team in planning for a more normalized school day, if you will, for the final quarter of the year. I really had thought, based on what New Jersey had published prior to a few weeks ago, that just about all of our school employees would have access to the vaccines really by probably Valentine's Day, and then be fully vaccinated by around St. Patrick's Day, and that by the time we return from spring break, which is the first week of April, we'd be in a different place with respect to staff members who would have been inoculated against COVID, if they so chose to become inoculated against COVID. So if nothing else, I can't, argue the merits of public health, because I'm not a public health expert, I'm not a scientist, but I can say as a superintendent that the deprioritization of school staff will mean that it takes longer to move schools into a more normal schedule and more normal school day, which is a shame. And it's hard to understand. I can understand why school nurses, by virtue of holding a nursing license and treating kids who may be symptomatic and have COVID, and our nurses have done that from time to time this year, I can understand why they'd be in the front of the line, as they should be. So they're treating kids who potentially have COVID and sometimes are confirmed to have COVID in our nurses' offices, but those very same kids may have just spent 45 minutes or 4 hours in a classroom with adults who have less PPE than the school nurses, but the adults in the classrooms are not eligible for vaccines. That just doesn't seem to make sense to me. It's frustrating. And although I know that there are districts out all over around us in New Jersey who have not been back to school yet, in this district, our teachers have been working every day since September, and they have been in classrooms filled with kids, and they deserve to have access to the vaccines. So if any of you, or if anyone who is watching this, is inclined to advocate for teachers and for staff members to get the vaccines, I would invite you to do so. I think that there should be a rethinking of the priority groups right now, and that there should be more direct and specific efforts made to vaccinate educators who are working with students every single day in the schools. So that's a long-winded way of saying that for the moment we will be in kind of a status quo mode in terms of the school schedules that we run. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. Hopefully the transmission rates in our region of New Jersey continue to decline. They have come down off of their highs quite considerably in the past month or so, but certainly they're nowhere near where they were in September when we began the year. So we're going to continue to be in the status quo mode. I'll also mention we have had a couple of instances already in 2021, this new year, where students have come to school symptomatic, in some cases even awaiting test results. And then when those test results are confirmed for COVID, it requires us to quarantine entire classrooms of students and staff members who've come in contact with those students who tested positive. So it's really critical, even though we're all very eager to get back into full mode of school, that we continue to work together. We continue to abide by the protocols that we have in place, all of the quarantining and isolation rules, so that we can do as much as we can to diminish the number of individuals who can't come to school because of COVID exposure. I'm happy to take any questions before I shift into the next bullet under my portion of the agenda, but that's the the state of affairs right now as we enter the month of February, which happens to be our 6th month of the school year.
Mike, I have a question for either you or Michelle, because she's an educator. Is there any rationale behind moving the teachers behind, lower in the list? I mean, is the teachers union for the districts that don't want to go back to school? I'm not saying our district, but are you hearing any pressure coming from the state level? Nothing?
No, my understanding simply is that there's a drive to vaccinate as many at-risk individuals as possible, which of course is laudable. But educators are essential workers. There's no way around that, and the educators that are in our schools every day are interacting with scores and scores of other people in congregate settings. So I can't quibble with trying to vaccinate high-risk groups. It's obviously, a life and death matter. But as a superintendent, I feel that I have an obligation to advocate for the staff members who are serving on the front line and working with literally dozens and dozens of students on a daily basis inside their classrooms.
Everything I've heard has been frustration in terms of not being able to vaccinate teachers as initially promised. But I do think, as a resident in Chatham, not even as a teacher myself, we all need to advocate for our teachers here. If a teacher wants a vaccine, a teacher should have the ability to get a vaccine. And I think by us, we have such an advantage to be able to have the choice to send our kids to school. Many districts in the state are closed. And we continue to be opening our doors and letting our kids who wish to be here to come. But we need to support our teachers. So if you feel it's important, it's one email. Send it to the governor's office, send it to the Department of Education. Tell them your child has been in school, what that has meant for your child. And in order for that to continue, our teachers need to be protected.
Hey, Mike. So 2 things. Is there any way you can put up on the website, is it advisable or is it too antagonistic to put contact information for parents to contact important state officials to advocate for what you're speaking of? That's number 1. And then number 2, did I hear you correctly that some kids are coming to school, like after the weekend, they have a fever, they're symptomatic, they're coming to school after having taken a test that they're waiting results for, and they came to school? Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct. That has happened in a couple of isolated instances. That's not the norm. Most parents are doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
All right,
but
so
we have had an instance or 2 in which a student was symptomatic in school, and we learned later that the student had been tested.
All right, is there a way to send out a polite, probably more polite than I would be, but some type of polite reminder to parents that we're all in this together, but just a general email reminder of what's a proper expectation, especially in light of the teachers being subverted in the line for vaccines?
Yes, we've done that. I've done that before, and I can do it again.
All right, out. Thanks.
Can I just give a shout out to our school nurses too, who I know have been extra cautious since a few of these incidents have happened. So they have kind of tightened up their protocol a little bit. If your kid so much as has the sniffles, keep them home until they get a negative test, because people are, oh, it's cold season, my son has a cold, my daughter might have a cold, I'm going to send them to school anyway. And what people don't understand, a lot of people don't understand, is one of the number 1 symptoms of COVID are cold symptoms. So the nurses have been really good about, I know at least at the high school, I've heard on numerous occasions about just telling parents to be extra cautious, but just spread the word. If your kid is not feeling well, please, please, please keep them home until they get a negative test, especially with our teachers not being able to be vaccinated. We're protecting them as well. So I think it's just really important, but our nurses are doing a really good job.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that as well. If you're unsure about what to do in these situations, absolutely keep your child home. I mean, we just saw, even this year, sports teams that have been delayed. We saw last year there was a group of kids that didn't get to go to prom. They almost didn't have graduation. The same thing could happen again this year. So we really need to be very, very careful about how we follow these guidelines. And if you're awaiting a test, your child shouldn't be anywhere near a school.
Thanks, everybody. You know, I don't think you could be too nice about it anymore, Mike. If you send your kid to school, you could potentially wipe out the whole school. So I heard one parent say, well, I don't want my kid to miss. Well, we might have to shut the whole school down, so they're going to miss anyway. And then the flippant remark after that was, well, at least then they'll be together, and everybody will be out of the school. We will not succeed with that type of attitude. So you either have to get on board, get behind us, or please get out of our way. If you wipe out an entire school, if you get an instructor sick, if you get a student sick, that's not going to help. We're not going to get back to normal. So if you're not feeling well, stay home. Stay home. Not that big a deal. Watch Netflix. Do your work from home. So please help us out, or please either help or get out of the way. Those are the only choices. I mean, we could keep sending these nice, polite notes, but, you know, Matt just said to me, it sounds like we're just talking about common sense. Yeah, it seems silly, but yeah, we're talking about common sense. So really, get on board. Mike, did you want to move over to the calendars or to mathematics?
Your call.
You know what, why don't you do the calendars quickly in case folks are just interested in hearing that, and then they can, you know, if they didn't want to stay for the rest, and then we'll move over to mathematics.
Sure. Just to recap, at the last meeting, there were 3 calendars that the board kind of took a look at to consider for next year. We're adopting a calendar for next year much later than we usually do because of how topsy-turvy things have been with COVID. The 3 calendars each had a different start date. One was August 23rd, one was August 26th, and one was August 30th. And at that meeting, I'd say the majority of the board indicated that August 23rd would be the preference, that it was time to get kids back in school as soon as possible, given what we've had to experience this year. And then we discussed it, at least briefly, some of the merits of beginning the school year earlier, which we've talked about in past years now, and why we've been moving gradually to an earlier start date. So subsequent to that meeting, the board continued to have discussions in committees, and a number of staff members and parents also reached out via email or other ways. And I think some of the resonating points with board members, though I won't speak for you, was just that given this year, maybe this isn't the best year to truncate the summer. And it's such a late date now that we're adopting a calendar that it could potentially interfere with folks who'd already made plans. So in the various committee meetings and other discussions that the board was having, they decided, you all, I think, indicated and directed me to take the feedback from the survey that went out, which indicated that the most popular calendar was the one with a full week off in February, and then retaining the teachers' convention days off as well. But take that feedback and start the year a week later on August 30th. So the calendar that is on the agenda tonight reflects those discussions, that August 30th would be the start date for students. There'd be a full week off in February, and the traditional time off for teachers' convention. And then I think our expectation and hope is that at the next board meeting, and possibly the one after that, we tackle the calendar for the following year so that there's more advance warning, and that if we move in the direction of starting the year earlier, as we've talked about in prior years, that we do that with enough notice for people to make plans.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was the consensus. Lotta hosted at least three curriculum meetings that we talked about it, and I know it was talked about in finance as well. It's just so late in the year. That's not to say the merits for moving it earlier aren't still present, and we still want to move in that direction. And people say, oh, you're rushing to a decision. I've been on the board for 10 years. Matt and Lotta have been on longer. We've been talking about it for 10 years. So I wouldn't really consider that a rush. So I would like to continue talking about moving it back to, I think, the 23rd, using the same survey results, because the calendar is very similar next year, and just put it back. But this gives everybody 18 months to plan ahead. And it doesn't shorten the summer, it just shifts it, correct? I mean, at the end of the day, we're in school 180 days of student instruction and out of school 185 days. I mean, the math doesn't change, correct? So the summer's just shifted slightly. And there's some advantages to that as well, having an earlier summer vacation, but most of it's around quality instructional time. So we could talk about that later in board business. Lott, I know you have a committee report, but just since we're talking about calendars, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that? Yeah, calendars. No, just calendars. Okay, because you had hosted those meetings. Okay, great. Does anybody else have any comments on that, or should we move over to the mathematics? Okay, good.
Okay, so the third item has to do with mathematics. We approved the program of studies right before the holiday break, if I'm not mistaken. But we've had some ongoing discussions about mathematics and specifically the sequence and the placement of geometry and algebra in our sequence. And these are other conversations that we've had for a number of years. And last year, right before we actually got hit with the pandemic, the curriculum committee was discussing this and considering a potential change. We pushed off the change because of what was going on, and we were considering pushing it off another year, but we actually think this will help better address some of the impacts from COVID that we are experiencing. So we've invited Ms. Winters to come in. She's met with the curriculum committee now, and she'll give just an overview of what she recommends as a tweak to our program of studies that will better prepare our students, we think, for high school mathematics. And we all may have to move down, or actually you all may have to move down because I think I'm going to control
Move down,
the
or the
slide.
confidence monitors are right here, if you could see those.
Oh, there you go.
It's up to you.
Hi. So I am here tonight, as Mike mentioned, to make a recommendation to switch the mathematics sequence, which I think will help our students. But
I can't hear Stacy at all, but I'm half deaf. Can you guys hear her?
is this better? Can you hear me now? Okay.
Give it a shot.
Yes?
Yep, very good, thanks.
Awesome. All right, so as I said, I was here tonight because I am making a recommendation to switch our mathematics sequence, which I think will help our students find success as they move through the math program, as Mike had said. So I thought it might be helpful to start by defining the things that we're going to be talking about today, and that is geometry and algebra. In a very simplistic definition, geometry deals with measurement, properties, and relationships of points, lines, angles, surfaces, and solids. When you get down to algebra, you're going to see that now letters start representing numbers. You'll even see the word abstract in that second line of the second part of the definition. You get into complex numbers, you get into matrices, and things that are not as concrete as drawing shapes and identifying relationships. These are 6 different questions that all can be found on assessments for the same geometry skill. So as we just talked about, we're looking at the relationships among angles and lines. In its simplest form, this is asking for kids to understand the relationship between the 8 angles formed, and it's easiest to see in the middle bottom picture. When you have parallel lines with a third line through it, there's 8 angles, and those angles have relationships to each other. These are 6 different ways that kids get asked whether or not they understand that concept. So looking at it one at a time, your far left is just, can you name the relationship of these 2 angles in green? You can also ask kids to identify the numeric relationship between them. And then you'll start to see what happens. Linear functions, which are just an x, get added in. Now, our students work with functions like this in our 7th grade curriculum. You'll see that the one on the left makes it a little bit more complicated by entering linear functions, and then the one on the right, you're going to add another line. Finally, you can add in, the one on the left has an x squared, which is a quadratic. That doesn't get taught until deep into Algebra 1. The one on the right has x's and y's, which again represents something called systems of equations, which is also taught in Algebra 1. So why do we do this? If the skill is to identify whether or not the two angles are the same size or add together to get 180, why do we do this? Here's our math sequence from 6th grade to 12th grade. Regardless of which pathway kids are going, you will see that Algebra 1 comes first, followed by Geometry, followed by Algebra 2. So what we are suggesting is that we do not need to put algebra into geometry problems to help kids maintain those skills to find success in Algebra 2 if we switch the sequence. Right now, students are seeing algebra because they need to. They need to maintain those skills over a year between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 to find success in Algebra 2 and beyond. On this guide, the only sequence change that we are looking to make this coming year is circled in red. We are looking to take 8th grade and switch with 9th grade, Algebra 1 and Geometry. So looking at that closer, currently kids go from Algebra 1 to Geometry and then Algebra 2 Pre-Calc and above. We're looking to do Geometry Algebra 1, Algebra 2 Pre-Calc and above. So notice nothing changes in terms of the end game. There is no change to the end result of where students will hit in high school. It's really important to understand that students do not need to know algebra to learn geometry. When you're looking at the end of your test for geometry, it does not include algebra standards. It does include what we teach in pre-algebra, which are those linear functions that result in simple equations that need solving, but it does not include algebra. Also, our Department of Ed standards do not mandate what the order is and in what classes the standards are taught. They just mandate that they are taught at some time through high school. We've also seen negative effects of teaching Algebra 1 too early. We know that algebra is really important for future success in classes that follow Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, and Calc. In fact, it's very common to hear kids in calculus saying, oh, I get the calculus, but it's the algebra. If kids attempt to do this algebraic, more abstract thinking too early, they might miss things and be not prepared for future study. They may also have a false conclusion regarding their own math ability. They may not think they're capable of doing the math, and they may steer away from careers in STEM, or it can have a negative impact on their social emotional health and wellness. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics put out a book called Catalyzing Change, where in 2018, where they identified pathways that they felt would strengthen mathematics in the US. And one of the two pathways was to do geometry first. And I've bolded some of the phrasing by not breaking up the algebra experience. So you're having Algebra 1 back to back with Algebra 2. And you're also postponing the more abstract concepts another year. In terms of high stakes assessments like the SAT and ACT, what you're seeing is as data science is increasing, you're seeing a bigger portion of the test devoted to that topic, the majority of the test devoted to algebra, and what's getting smaller and smaller and smaller is the piece that represents geometry on our tests. So in thinking about how we're going to do this, we need to look at curriculum, because right now our curriculum integrates algebra into the geometry. So by making this switch, we need to revise what we're doing to make sure that we are reinforcing pre-algebra to help prepare kids with a strong foundation. But we need to make sure that we take the algebra out. I need to work with teachers and do some professional development so that they understand this curricular shift and the expectations that are going to be placed on kids if they take geometry in grade 8 following pre-algebra. And we need to communicate this effectively to staff, parents, and students. hands down, we believe this will be better for students to not have a gap between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. It also will help us have precise recommendations so that we can take their experience in Algebra 1 and use it to better predict Algebra 2 success. We know that algebra is the foundation for higher level mathematics through the high school. And we also believe that this year there may be a need to review pre-algebra for Math 6 and Math 7 to really make sure that foundation is strong coming out of this year. And this will provide the opportunity to do that prior to venturing into Algebra 1. So for those reasons, that is my recommendation.
Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate that. I did sit on the curriculum meeting, but if you could just cover, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. I always thought it was out of sequence anyway, but, you know, not my specialty, so I never questioned it. Is Algebra 1, in your opinion, the heavier lift for students, the more meatier of the three that we're talking about, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry?
So I would say the algebra curriculums
Sorry, Stacy, could you hang on 1 second? I apologize, I can't hear when the motor's going. You good? Okay, thanks. Sorry, Stacy.
No problem. I would say the algebra curriculums in general are more dense than the geometry curriculum itself. We do a lot of, like I said, integration, so we add to the geometry curriculum where we don't need to better prepare our students for that gap year between the two algebras. So when it comes to Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, it's almost like a course divided into 2 years. So it's hard to identify the difference between that. I would say that it's the first attempt at really abstract thinking for kids. So kids tend to struggle a little bit more in Algebra 1 sometimes than in geometry because of its geometry. You can, you know, play with the shapes and you use a lot more manipulatives and you do constructions and things like that. So I anticipate, obviously, that we will find greater success overall with our students by making this shift.
I agree, it makes sense. You had me at better for students, but go ahead, Sal.
So this makes a lot of sense, and especially I want to say thank you for the way you presented it. It was very clear and very understandable why you're doing this. My only question is, why was it a different way before this? Why did geometry split Algebra 1 and Algebra 2? What was the rationale then?
So many, many years ago, when I guess these sequences were put into place, it was based off of what the standardized tests assessed. And many of them didn't assess Algebra 2, but they assessed Algebra 1 and geometry. You're also talking about a time where Algebra 1 was at the high school level for all students, including geometry. In other words, what you're seeing now where there's this trend in students doing Algebra 1 or high school level work in the middle school wasn't there. So as students were taking these standardized tests, they needed a full year of algebra and a full year of geometry before going in. Now, I believe the history also dates back to some of the colleges and what they looked for when they wanted a transcript. And you're talking about originally Algebra 1. I mean, years and years ago, this has been into place for as long as I know, and way before me. And so I believe that the shift came both for standardized testing, or the sequence came for standardized testing, as well as colleges saying, oh, we'd like some kids to take geometry too, and then it just continued to build on from there. I know there is a history, and I'm happy to get you that information, but it's any reason that basically, the bottom line is any reason that caused the sequence to be in this order no longer exists and is no longer relevant, and it's time to rethink the way we're doing it to better prepare our kids for moving forward.
And one last comment.
Sure.
After this is implemented, I would love it if a year from now you come back and tell us how you assess how it's gone. That's it.
Sure.
Hi, thank you. How difficult is it to remove algebra from geometry right now? How difficult is the task of making this switch, and do you have enough time to do it
Yes.
for September?
So the answer is yes. We have enough time, and it's difficult in that the expectations have to be clearly defined. The set of skills that students have coming into geometry need to be very specific and clearly defined so that as teachers are creating resources, and we have looked at our current resource to make sure, because of the year that the teachers have had, they've adjusted to a resource, and we wanted to make sure we could use the current resource in this sequence, and we can. So the teachers don't have to do the heavy lifting of learning a new program. They do have to revise some of the worksheets by taking a quadratic function or a system of equations, which were those more complicated Algebra 1 integrations, and pulling back and doing pre-algebra type integrations, which were going to be your more linear, simpler functions. And so you'll still see the same exact problems, but as I showed with that first series of slides, we're not going to go to that third slide anymore. We're not going to hit the algebra, which can really frustrate a student if they feel like they understand the geometry, they set up the equation correct because they understood the relationship between the angles, and then they end up getting the subsequent question wrong because of the algebra work. So we're going to take those things out. So it's more removing things and just making sure we're removing enough so that the students can find success. And that's what we're going to work on professional development with all spring, is making sure teachers understand the expectation and the level in which kids will be entering their class.
Thank you, Stacy.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Winters or Dr. LaSuso or Ms. Chase?
I just have one more question.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Mike.
When you're completed with the transition, can I come back and take geometry?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Matt Gilfillan said he wants to do all the problems that you put up on this third slide.
I just have a quick question. So our current 8th graders, if this is to go forward, they will be the last, they'll go to the high school, take their geometry in 9th grade and Algebra 2 and so on from there. So the impact would be on our current 7th graders, not
Correct.
impact, the positive impact would be our current 7th graders rising to 8th grade next year.
Correct.
Is that where we're at? Okay.
Yep. So 7th grade doesn't change, but in that circled red square, in that circled red area, instead of them going to Algebra 1 or Honors Algebra 1, they're going to go to Geometry or Honors Geometry. So you're just flipping right those things in red. That's correct.
Thank you, Stacy. So oh, well, Peter, you have a question, really, on geometry?
I do. I am just curious why you're not changing the sequence for the honors group.
So in speaking about this, we know that there's going to be a lot of professional development needed so that everybody's on the same page and to do right by the students. We didn't want to affect too many different groups at the same time. So the plan is, this is phase 1, and the following year, we plan to do this for the other groups going through, but it involves different grade levels and different groups of students at different grade levels. So we want to make sure that as we make that switch, we also need to make sure we're meeting the needs of the science needs. So we're going to integrate with the science curriculums and make sure that the algebra necessary for success there is going to be embedded in the program. And so we're going to do it over 2 years. You're welcome.
Thank you, Stacy, I appreciate it. And don't feel obligated to hang around. I know you've had an 18-hour day, so don't stay around just to be polite. For the board members, this is board action, and it's item C4, so we can vote on it then. If there's no additional questions, Dr. LaSuso, I'll bring it back to you.
And I'll put it right back on you. I
Okay,
think
very
that's
good.
it for my report, and now it's up to you to talk about whatever you wish to talk about, and we can alter the slideshow if you need to.
Okay, very good, thank you. So Peter, we're going to go over to you now for your reports. Oh, you have control of the screen.
I can't control the screen, so I just have 2 items for the business administrator update. On the construction end, we've started to work on the planning for the projects that will be included in the 2021-2022 budget, and started working with the architect to get those planned out. The other item I have is obviously agenda item B8. Obviously, I'm asking the board to approve the audit report, which is the the CAFRA and the management report. Unfortunately, the auditors could not make it this evening with the change in the date, but Scott Cleland, the partner of WIS, which is our auditing firm, presented the report that I will read. And if you need proof that it came from him, I can give you the email, so all the accolades were written by him, not just me boasting. They first wanted to thank the administration for doing a very good job managing the everyday financial operations of the district. The auditors spend a great deal of time working on the audit, and it takes a lot of effort and time from the district, and they appreciate the cooperation. This year was a great challenge since the majority of the audit was done remotely, and they think it was more successful than they originally anticipated. The audit is being completed later than normal due to the state OPEB information not being available until December. The state deadline was moved to February 5th, so that I will file the reports tomorrow, so we'll make that. The most important part is we have an unmodified opinion, which means a clean opinion that everything is in line and we keep all our ducks in a row in the financial perspective. The highlights are that the district is in a very good position with its general fund balance. Our fund balance was able to be increased as a result of the audit. Our excess fund balance will be used next year. It is a bit excessive, more than normal, to a total of $1.475 million. He said that a lot of districts are having this issue due to reduced spending in COVID. Their suggestion is to utilize that in the 21 22 budget for one-time items. So that we will do. We were able again to increase the capital reserve, and again, we did use funds in the current budget year, and we'll use capital reserve funds next year. And the manager report, once again, has no corrective action findings. And that's, unless anyone has any questions, that's all I have for my report.
I don't have any questions. Matt, did you want to add anything to that? Go, Phil. Later, okay. I'll wait with bated breath then for that one. And no additional questions for Peter? No, okay, great. We're going to move over to committee reports, and we're going to start with you on personnel.
Yes, so we met on January 13th, just talked about updates on staffing and any leaves. And I don't know when our next meeting is. I don't think we have one.
Yeah, we might not have it on the calendar yet. It's kind of fluid with our schedules. Great, thank you. And Lotta, over to you for curriculum. I know you had like 3 meetings since last we met.
Yes, we met 3 times. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
No, I'm getting a no. They can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh, is this good? Okay.
Pretend you're yelling at the kids on in hearing. Go ahead. Feel that.
We met 3 times. We discussed the calendar. We discussed the sequencing that Ms. Winters just went over. And lastly, there was a presentation from Doug Walker, who did a presentation on the graduates from CHS and the colleges that they attended. Additionally, Kate Slate, who is a career counselor, also spoke about the students' preparedness for post-secondary life.
Thank you. That's fantastic. The career counsel position has been very successful, very well received. The kids are using that resource exactly as we'd intended, and Matt has been beating a drum for as many years as I've known him about, pushing alternatives for the kids post-college. Maybe not everybody's driven that first year to go to college. Look at vocations, look at doing internships, different opportunities for gap years. So I think that position is helping in that front, Matt, which you've been advocating for, like I said, as long as I've known you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions or comments for Lotta? Nope. Moving over to finance then, Matt?
Yes, we met on January 20th. A couple different things. Pete already talked about the audit, so Pete, once again, thank you to you and your team for doing an excellent job. In terms of the capital reserve, we are going to have enough money. I'm not going to give the final numbers yet until we get through the whole process, but it looks as though we're going to have enough excess reserves in order to take on a number of projects that we were actually going to go and utilize in a referendum. That's a positive for us. As you know, right now, the referendum is probably a long way away in terms of what we needed to address a number of issues that are highly pressing. So with the fact that we're going to have an increased capital reserve, we're going to be able to take care of a number of those projects without having to go to the public for a referendum. We talked about the summer programs. Mike and the administration has come up with some great ideas in terms of extending into the summer programs for kids of need as a result of COVID. We were very supportive of that, but we also asked Mike to go and look at other opportunities to address and add summer programs for kids with any kind of mental health issues that were driven by this year in terms of issues from isolation, from COVID, just from everything they've gone through. So we are, as an entity, want to support anything we can do to help our kids get through this time and really try to, as we move towards that transition from, lack of a better word, lunacy into normality. So Mike has our support to try to put together anything he can to try to help our kids. We discussed full-day kindergarten, and you're going to hear me use a word that will get you excited, but we are actually going to plan for a normal school year next year for full-day kindergarten. We are actually really excited about that. It's kind of odd that we get so excited about a single word, but we are still going to have to just go through the process. You know, Mike's going to go through the process in terms of signing the kids up. We're not going to ask for any funds until a later date, just because we want to see what happens with COVID and all the issues that are associated with it. But I'm happy about that. We discussed the same thing, subscription busing. We're going to continue to look at that. However, we don't know what that will look like due to the COVID situation, so we're going to try to take a little later approach to that into that March and April timeframe. We did talk an initial look at our 21-22 budget in terms of what we're going to ask from a tax increase purpose. There is a large proposed change now in terms of a surplus that we are allowed to keep. As you know, I'm not quite sure when this started, but we have a max surplus of 2%. This is now going to 4%. We are not going to look at this as something we're going to get to overnight. We may have a gradual increase towards that 4% figure, but we don't think we need to do it. And then last thing was the calendar, which has already been addressed.
Excellent, thanks, Matt. And just to clarify, full-day kindergarten, we're happy, you're happy, but again, that's tuition-based, correct?
That's tuition-based, yeah. There's no
Okay.
difference in that. It's just the fact that we're actually talking about a normal event.
Right.
And it's going to be the same lottery process, correct? As it was?
Yes, so Ms. Chase and I met with the elementary principals Monday afternoon to talk about the timeline and the process. We're going to do exactly what we did last year in terms of the lottery at each building. One section at each school is the plan right now. And the main difference will just be that we will not be asking for the deposit at such an early date like we did last year. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify is the change in the surplus from 2% to 4% is still a proposal. The governor and the legislature haven't acted on that yet. So it's in the ether and people are talking about it, but that's not a done deal yet.
Just another follow-up question for full-day kindergarten, just for kindergarten enrollment in general. What is that enrollment process happening now, and how many people what's our projected class size going to be?
That enrollment process, the registration process is happening now for kindergarten and first grade. We are low right now. I don't have the number right at my fingertips, but the last time I checked, we were lower than we've been. And with full-day kindergarten, we discussed on Monday reducing the class size. We had it at 24, but with COVID, with the safety protocols that we will need to have in place, we will not have a class size that high. It'll be in the 18 to 20 range. So we'll have fewer students, but reflect the anticipation that even if we're back more to normal, we're still going to have to follow probably a whole host of protocols with regard to spacing and distancing and face coverings and all the rest.
How does information get to the community about just not only kindergarten, but kindergarten enrollment? Like, it's 100 years since my kids went to kindergarten, but Is it just through the school district? Do we publicize on different media sources? to
We do.
just
Yep.
Alert, okay, I just want to make sure we're tapping, because I think people are kind of checked out and focused on other things right now, and I think this is happening in other places too, where it's just, I think people have their eyes on different things right now, and obviously we don't know until the day school starts, but maybe if we can do another push out, just remind people who might not have kids in school that, this is the time, this is where schools are, this is how you register.
Good idea.
Thanks. And Matt, just back to the, your comment on mental health. Is there a way to earmark or set aside money? Because I don't know that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the effects of the pandemic is going to be. I don't think anybody that's going to be struggling is going to come in on August 30 and say, I'm struggling. It could be 6 months, 9 months, 2 years down the road. Is there a way to earmark some of that money that you just mentioned for programs that we may need that we just can't even anticipate just yet?
We discussed a way to fund these projects within internal operating dollars.
I don't just mean the extended school year, I meant
No,
any-
we've asked Mike to not be afraid to come to us to try to allocate more dollars to these summer programs. So we want to be supportive of anything that we can do to get us through this year.
My fear is that we don't know when some of these issues may manifest themselves, having never lived through a pandemic or this type of social isolation for our students. No idea what it's going to do. It keeps me up at night. So I think we're going to need to be prepared to have the resources to help these kids on a moment's notice, or even staff members. I say kids, but it could be anybody that's been involved in this and closely working in this type of environment. So somehow we need to make sure that we have the resources to act quickly.
Yes, so that's the challenge for sure. We are anticipating learning about what our allotment will be from the recent stimulus package that went through. I'm talking about the one at the end of 2020. There may be more coming through depending on how things go in Washington. But of course, that's one-time revenue. It's not ongoing revenue. And for that, we have to look at state aid and what that will be at the end of this month. We lost, whatever the dollar amount was, I can't remember right now, maybe $300,000, I think it was, in state aid coming into this year that was clawed back. So we're going to learn if that's going to be restored, or we're going to be flat funded, or we're going to lose funding. Chapter 44 has hit us, and it's hit other districts in a way that will be recurring long-term with more revenue loss. So I think what we discussed with finance was programming for this summer, and one-off programming is something that we can accomplish, we think, because we're going to get more funding via the stimulus. And we have additional funds from last year, savings that we were able to realize because of the schools being closed. But it's the long-term recurring revenue that is the challenge for us. So those conversations will be ongoing, and we'll get our first kind of sign from the governor at the end of this month about what state aid will look like moving forward next year.
So I have a question, Joe, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Michael.
So Matt, we don't have the ability to kind of, it sounds like these mental health initiatives are going to be on a year-to-year basis depending on what revenue is coming in that year. So we don't have the ability to reserve for the future. In other words, some of the mental health issues could be long-term, presenting themselves, a couple of years from now. So do we have any budgetary mechanisms that we can use to hold some dollars back somewhere in a fund or whatever that enables us to use it for that specific purpose, should we need to do that in the future?
I think we're all on the same page. It's just the operating budget versus capital, but I don't know that it has to be, Mike, a long-term operating budget item. It could be that we hire consultants. Again, we don't know. I don't know. But I think that the message is we want to make sure that we're in a position to support it. The message to Mike is that don't be afraid. You got to just tell us what we need, and we've got to make it happen. Even if, we deprioritize other things, that's fine. The message is that this is a priority.
I would agree 100%. I think that the statistics are absolutely alarming. I watched a segment on Fox News this morning only because it was a friend of mine from college that Jill actually knows, whose nephew took his own life due to mental illness, but also the COVID situation didn't help. And his father gave a statistic this morning that in their county in Illinois, that there have been 30 suicides in the 16 to 18-year-old range since COVID began, and 5 kids who have died from COVID, but 30 suicides. I mean, the statistics are ridiculous. So I think we need to also make a big point of whatever programs we do come up with to really push these programs, advertise them, get them in front of parents, in front of kids, and let them know that there is support and there is, there are things available to them. I think, like Jill said, they're not going to jump out of the woodwork, but I think the more we advertise it, the better it's going to be.
I'm going to concur as well. I believe I sent you a newspaper article about Las Vegas, which had an insane spike in incidences that we really don't want to talk about. So one of the things that you talked about with mental health initiatives and some of your staff going back 2 years was the use, because there's such a shortage of mental health therapists everywhere throughout the country and certainly in this area. And one of the ideas was to tap into master's students at local universities. And even if we're doing that, to try to help students in our system right now that are especially having a tough time due to the abnormal situation we've all experienced in the last year, feel free to be creative with your ideas.
Okay, great, thanks. That was probably the longest finance report we've heard in a long time, but thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. If there's nothing else, I'm going to punt this over to Mr. Ryan for policy and planning. I don't know.
Policy hasn't met since we last met.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Nothing to.
Okay, so liaison reports. Lada, I believe you said you had one?
This is a report for Chatham Education Foundation. CEF would like to thank all the families who chose to recognize teachers and staff. There were close to 1,000 teacher tributes for the holidays. CEF would also like to announce a fundraiser to help CEF and local businesses. There's a special Valentine Give Back fundraiser with Hickory Tree Pizza, Woodland Bakery, and TM Award. And lastly, the second annual Eve of Recognition will be held on April 15th, and details on how to attend will be available in the next few weeks. This and all other information can be found on their website, which is chathamedfoundation.org.
Excellent, thank you. Any additional liaison reports, Anne?
Yes, from Chatham Borough, we are, Mike and Jill and I and Mike Ryan are actually meeting with the Borough Council members tomorrow night virtually to discuss the River Road project, the pilot program of the 200 and some odd rental units that are going in to talk about the effects on the school district financially, and so we'll report back on that. So that's happening tomorrow.
Okay, great. So more to follow on that. And just to recap, Ann and I attended a meeting on January 21st. It was the third borough town hall meeting. The first one and the third one, a large portion of the dialogue was spent on the impact of school districts. And I just want to cover again that the impact of the school districts from the analysis done by the consultant is strictly based on capacity in a building, whether there's a seat available or not. And the consultant, who's very knowledgeable, Dr. Powell, came up with the number of 46, and I don't really want to dispute that number, but the 46 that they're saying is going to come from River Road doesn't account for any other expenses, educational expenses, when you add students to a district. Last time I used the example of special education only because it's easy to quantify. If a child needs a paraprofessional, that's about $29,000 a year in expenses. If the children are, for example, in second grade and we just add 2, maybe there's 2 students in second grade for Washington Avenue, that may push us over the limit where we need to create another section. So the 2 students themselves didn't cost $70,000, but the 2 students were the tipping point that then incurred the additional expense of $70,000. And I also want to point out, from a district's point of view, we have to consider both the projects in the township as well as the projects in the borough. So the 256 new rental units are only talking about the River Road project. That doesn't cover the Charlie Brown property, it doesn't cover the Arbor Green property, which is also called the skate park, and it doesn't cover the Dixie Dale property. Those are in the pipeline. There's nothing solidified. We don't know the number of bedrooms, which would help us with numbers. And none of those numbers take into account Post Office Plaza or the Noe Pond property. So, as Ann mentioned, we're meeting with the borough. The goal is to somehow come up with a way to share some of the pilot agreement to ensure that the school district is not negatively impacted. Without a crystal ball, it's very hard to attribute, an exact dollar amount, but we're going to try and at least open the dialogue and explain some of these expenses. But we definitely need to keep an eye on that. It's also hard to predict future expenses. Somebody may move into the River Road project in 4th grade and be totally fine, and by the time they get to high school, they may be impacted by depression or school aversion. So those additional expenses are impossible to predict or anticipate. So our goal as a board is to try and work with our municipalities, again, not talk about the projects or the merits of the projects strictly from the impact to a school perspective. So that's what we're going to do. Our first meetings with the borough on Thursday. We're going to lean heavily, obviously, on Dr. LaSousa, who's the expert, and not that he has a crystal ball, but he might be able to, help solidify or clarify some of the additional expenses coming down the pike. So we know we've looked into other districts. Madison had a similar situation where, they shared a percentage of the pilot agreement. I don't know what the right answer is. Is it a percentage? Is it an annual dollar figure that's negotiated every year? We don't know, but we just want to let you know that we're having an open dialogue with the borough. And again, when you hear the number 46, remember that's just maybe an available seat. It doesn't take into account any additional expenses. And the other little caveat I would like to clarify is Dr. Powell used a demographer study that we paid for back in 2018 by Dr. Grip, who was very detailed. It didn't just take into account birth rate. But that study was done before the other projects were in the pipeline. It was done before the pandemic, and the data is stale as of 2023. So before shovels are in the ground on some of these projects, that data is stale. So we're hoping to, once we know more, the board can engage Dr. Grip to update that demographer's report, but there's no sense in paying for that consultant fee until we know more, because the data is stale. It's only good for 5 years, and if we don't know more information about those other projects that are listed, the information is not valuable to us. So again, it's more just to be transparent. We're having a conversation with the borough. We'll keep you as informed as we can. Hopefully we're all rowing in the same direction and that we don't have any negative impact to the school. And, the administrators and the council have said, listen, if we need to meet every year, we'll do that. So, let's hope we can all just, move down the field and ensure that the school district remains whole and is not negatively impacted by the development. Law, did you have a question on that?
Yes. I think trees are coming down on Dixie Dale Farm, so I think the township, are we having similar conversations on the township side? Because if trees are coming down, I feel like the project is moving forward.
We're just not there yet. I don't think, Michelle, I'm going to look to you.
My understanding from the conversation, they're not as far down the road as the borough is. But I will certainly follow up, and they've been very responsive. Anytime we've reached out to the township committee, we've gotten an immediate response, but I don't believe they're at that point.
But are they doing the same study type of things in terms of?
They have predictions as well as capacity in a building.
Okay.
But again, we have the same complexity that doesn't really show the full picture.
Okay.
But they're just not as...
It's also a different project in the sense that there will be property taxes on those properties. So this is a pilot program where the developer is not paying tax. They do what they call principal in lieu of taxes. So the whole point being that there is no value, without having the discussion, there's no value given to what potentially the school district could get from the
So
pilot
the
program.
township's tax structure is going to be different than
That's
the
not a pilot
borough?
program. This is the only one so far that is a pilot program.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is the only one we know for sure that is a payment in lieu of taxes
Correct.
agreement with a private developer. And again, they published on the borough website, they have a tremendous amount of information. They published, I want to share this with Matt, in fact, they published their agreement that the payment that they anticipate going into the borough's municipalities budget. And our dialogue is to say, can we get a portion of that, a percentage of that, a share of that? I don't know how that is going to work out.
I was under the impression that there were more projects that were under that same
I don't believe
structure.
so, no, because
So-
Dixie-Dale, they're going to be for sale. They're not rental units. And you can only have a pilot program when it's a rental unit because it's taxes to the developer, not to the individual, because they don't own. So if they own, they have to pay property.
But I mean, I think that bodes better for the district in that there'll be a little bit more
Financially,
direct.
yes.
I mean, there's less, I mean, it's not.
It's just more structured.
It's,
financially.
right, exactly.
Right.
Is that if there's students that are, they're paying directly to their property taxes are going towards the district as opposed.
Well, remember, we don't get any additional money from any of these developments, as Matt has said 100 times. Our budget is decided by the previous year's budget, so whether...
No, but
Okay.
they're going to be contributing towards the ownership pie, just like we.
Yes,
are.
it will disperse the taxes
Yes.
more for the township residents, that's correct. So you'll be paying less, the township people will pay less. But the school district will not receive any additional benefit from that, just the way the school budgets work.
No, but there's less of a, it's not as if, as opposed to this borough situation with this one tax structure where they could potentially keep all of the money generated from the taxes for the borough and none of it would go to the district. The other structure, the other payment structure is something that we're all sort of, used to in that.
I
everyone
believe
has
so,
a
I believe that's the
yeah.
case, yeah.
And it's coming to the school.
Yeah, Michelle is the township liaison, and Ann is the borough liaison for the Board of Ed. That's why I was looking to Michelle on that one. Any additional questions? Again, I know I covered this last time. I just want to make sure it's fresh in everybody's mind what the dialogue is about. Okay, fantastic. Any additional liaison reports? Connor, you could lift the screen whenever you get a moment. Thank you. Okay, fantastic. So no additional liaison reports. I'm going to make a motion to move the minutes of the January 11th public session and the executive session.
Second.
Who is not here, Peter?
Ms. Chicarelli and Mr. Gilfillan.
Okay, great. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? There you go. Excellent.
Duly noted, passed 602.
Excellent, thank you. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And just a reminder, this is the opportunity for folks to make any comments or compliments that they have. It's not going to be a back and forth. If we can answer any questions, we'll try and do that at the end after we close the public comment section. So I'm going to turn my mic off and turn it over to you.
My name is Betsy Long. I'm a co-president of Chatham's Education Association. Good evening, Ms. Weber, Dr. LaSousa, and the board. We want to first begin by acknowledging the board's willingness to listen to our concerns in regards to moving up the fall 2021 start date. We gathered information from our members, we presented that information to you, and we feel like we were acknowledged. However, we know that some of the issues that we presented will not go away should the early start date be considered in the future. For example, starting early affects many of our members from a financial perspective. For our almost 280 members who answered our survey, over $200,000 of impact is projected due to loss of only the summer employment opportunities that our members undergo and childcare expenditures because of an early start in comparison to other school districts. This does not include the prepaid vacations that would have come into consideration for this calendar year. Starting the school year in August is not compatible with the pension system, which disallows staff from being paid before September 15th, thus making staff work for almost a full month before being paid without pay. This is dictated by the New Jersey pension system for 10-month employees. So any certificated teachers would be in that bucket as well. The shift in summer means the increased burden at one time on our secretarial, custodial, and maintainer staff to complete summer break work over a shortened amount of time. While the 2021-22 school year has been amended and accounts for these things, and we are very thankful for that consideration for our points, these issues will still be present if Chatham schools start in mid-August in future years. The discussion and vote on the 22-23 calendar will be coming in the next 2 months, and these points will still be as important in that conversation.
Good evening. My name is Laura Noonan. I'm co-president of the Chatham Education Association. While we understand that it is the jurisdiction of the board and the superintendent to change the calendar as they see fit, we would still like to be at the table during discussions. As school districts around us have had COVID-related conflict between staff and administration, we have collaborated together to figure out solutions that fit most of our needs. We would like to continue this collaboration. Please continue to involve us in these conversations. Our dedication to the Chatham community and our profession has been amazing. Chatham school staff deserve recognition for not only consistently coming to school, but meeting the challenges of this year head-on while still delivering instructional excellence. Teacher and staff are putting an incredible amount of effort and dedication into each day's discussions, and all of us are exhausted and stressed, continuing the fight to keep our heads above water. All of us, teachers, paraprofessional, child study teams, guidance, custodial and maintaining staff, and secretaries. We have invited a few of our representatives to speak tonight about what our schools look like currently and the concerns voiced by the membership. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Dr. LaSousa and members of the board. My name is Jennifer Ciffredella, and I am a CEA rep for Lafayette, and I am here to represent all of our K-5 members. We would like to take this opportunity to inform the board about the situation specific to the K-5 teachers. We have been teaching full classrooms of children since September. 85 to 95% of elementary students are in school each day. Not only do we teach full classrooms, but we also juggle teaching students who are completely virtual. And when the students leave each day, we then hold Google Meets to continue live instruction. The perception is one that children need to return to school, when in reality, the children at the elementary level are in school and have been in school every day. K-5 teachers are unique, as we are responsible for teaching multiple curricular subjects each day. The planning for this type of instruction is daunting, and many of us already spend unpaid hours in the summer planning, creating lessons, and setting up the classrooms. This oftentimes is a very delicate balance, as it is done in between summer jobs and securing time when we can find someone to watch our children for a few hours so we can steal away to school. To begin school in those precious weeks we use to develop our school year would not only be a detriment to us, but to our families, but really to our students, as we would not have the proper time to map out our year. Over 40 elementary teachers have already had to find scarce childcare in August and would have to rearrange agreements in order to have childcare in the last weeks of August. This would result in a hardship for at least 20 of our staff members who would have to pay money out of pocket for additional childcare. In addition to the aforementioned points, many teachers are employed throughout the summer months, not for spending money, but to survive. And a mid-August start date would greatly jeopardize summer employment. At least 20 staff members would lose at least $33,000 in income with a calendar change. In closing, as we gather tonight, many school districts across the state are in the compromising position of having teachers that are refusing to enter the buildings. That is not the case for us, members of the Chatham Education Association. We have shown up since September, and we will continue to do this and show up for our students. All we ask in return is consideration for us when deciding the calendar for the forthcoming school year. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jackie Chirico, and I am the Library Media Specialist at Chatham Middle School, and I'm also a CEA rep for the middle school as well. And I am here tonight with my colleague, Simone Gaunt, to highlight for you specific concerns that our staff members have regarding an early start, mid-August start to any school year. And we want to be specific about that. We're not speaking about the 2021 school. Since the start of the pandemic, our faculty and staff have worked tirelessly to deliver the exceptional instruction that school districts, Chatham students, and families deserve. However, while our teachers have been working extremely hard and walking into the building each day with smiles under our masks and greeting students with palpable enthusiasm, there is a layer of fear that they carry day in and day out. Coming into a building with 500 plus people every day during the pandemic poses risk. Risks to the staff members themselves and to their own families. Most recently, despite the rising number of cases of COVID-19 worldwide, as well as reports of new variants, which are so contagious that even the president has enacted an immediate ban on some flights entering the United States to step this high transmission, SDOC schools remain open, our teachers remain in school for in-person instruction. SDOC faculty and staff have gone above and beyond this school year, and we have met each daily challenge with incredible grace, patience, and understanding. We hope that you agree. The thought of bringing students and staff back mid-August seems counterintuitive to professional educators who work with children every day, regardless of whether or not we are in the school center. School districts and Chatham have poured a lot of time and resources over the last several years into the district's wellness and social and emotional learning initiatives. If we really want to place emphasis on wellness as a critical component in the education of children, then we need to make deliberate decisions to balance rigor with social and emotional well-being. Good evening. My name is Simone Gaunt. I'm also the director of middle school. When we talk about our wellness initiative, it considers rigor and it also considers social emotional well-being, both of which are not symbiotic. While both are necessary, it's critical that we balance them, not only for our students, but for our staff as well. This will allow our district to maintain being one of the best in the state, which we're all very proud of. It is no secret that the SDOC community values education, but let us not forget that our community also values family and time spent together. Our staff is no different. Our teachers, secretaries, support staff, custodians, and maintainers deserve to have the time to spend with their families during the brief summer months. While our staff is employed by the school district of the Chathams, we come from dozens of districts throughout the state of New Jersey, many which do not run on calendars from August through early June. In fact, most of our teachers at CMS come from districts that are not starting their academic year until the tail end of August or after Labor Day, according to our surveys. Not only would an early August start date be a detriment to students and staff wellness, it also poses staffing concerns to the district and financial burdens to staff members. The mid-August start date and early June release date presents innumerable hardships to the CMS staff based on surveys that we conducted. Some of that data includes 20 staff members who already know they will face child care issues. 18 staff members
23 staff members who are employed over the summer months would be impacted financially if they aren't able to work or possibly even hold those positions due to the mid-August start date. Teachers who typically teach ESY are reluctant to do so because they would have greatly reduced time with their families, whose school start and end dates would not be aligned with ours. Additionally, the children in the ESY program would be equally impacted. We realize we're still in the midst of the pandemic. Please know that our presence here tonight does not reflect a COVID reaction. Rather, it's a permanent stance against beginning the school year in mid-August, and we hope that you understand our concerns. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Terrence Ferguson, instructor of English at the high school and a building rep at the high school as well. Wanted to thank you for understanding the hardships that a mid-August start date would impose on the faculty at the high school and deciding to remain consistent with the start dates that teachers have grown accustomed to and planned their lives around for this upcoming summer. But in looking towards the future, we earnestly propose a similarly circumspect attitude when considering calendars and school start dates. For teachers, the summer is far more than a time to recharge and prepare for the next school year, who deserve rest and relaxation. Teachers work over the summer to supplement income shortfalls. Teachers attend graduate class to improve their knowledge and fine-tune their delivery of materials to students. At the high school, especially, teachers further their education to meet the demands of talented, dedicated, college-bound students. AP teachers attend conferences and courses for certification to ensure their success as teachers and students who commit to high-stakes, pressure-laden exams. Summertime served as an important period for teachers to care for their families, children, spouses, aging parents, with regards to medical appointments, planning logistically for the upcoming year, and attending personal business that cannot always be attended to during the school year. Truth is that Chatham educators come to work on an extraordinarily reliable basis, a fact that has been proven dramatically during this past school year with the unforeseen, unimaginable consequences of the COVID era. We take our job seriously and perform our duties in a superior fashion within the confines of the calendar, but also outside of the calendar. We hope to maintain this standard not just next year, but in the years to come as well, as we work in a partnership with the board to adhere to a sensible, manageable calendar. Thank you.
Thank you all. As a quick reminder, if each individual that spoke would please sign in under the public commentary sheet. Thank you.
Any additional public commentary at this time?
Can I just say one more thing unrelated to the calendars?
Sure.
I just want to circle back to what Mike was talking about earlier in the meeting regarding vaccinations for teachers and having the community support and advocate for teacher vaccinations. If we could maybe perhaps think about the benefits of students being in school, as we know with all of the anxiety and depression that you've just talked about, which is horrifying and shocking. Perhaps getting teachers vaccinated would allow students to return faster to some form of normalcy. And if we can fold that into the advocation for teacher vaccinations, that would be twofold for our district, for sure, as a way of, considering the children as well as the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments or from anybody at all? Okay. Great. So we're going to close the public comment section for now.
Can I just say one thing really quickly, Ms.
Well,
Weber?
what makes you think I didn't have something to say first?
Oh, well, you said, oh, sorry.
Have you
I
met
thought
me?
you were moving on.
Have you met me, Mike? So just real quick, I just wanted to comment. I've heard a few of you say mid-August, and I think one of you may have said early August. I apologize. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sorry. I am hard of hearing, so I can't see your lips. So sometimes it's hard for me to hear. So nobody's talked about mid-August or early August. We're talking about shifting 1 week, and that's what we've always talked about for the last 10 years. So, the dialogue that you're having at the schools, if you could change it from mid-August to the third week in August, that would be helpful. And I just want to be clear that certainly nobody at this table thinks that the teachers haven't been working extremely hard under difficult circumstances, not just this year, but in years past. So please don't think that this board is cavalier about your efforts at all. And we absolutely appreciate family time. When we have a deeper dialogue during board business, I just want to remind folks that, again, it's a shift. It's not taking away a single day. It's not adding an additional day of instruction time. It's just a shift in the calendar in hopes of achieving additional quality instruction time. I'm not an educator. You know, if somebody says you're off your rocker, then so be it. This is nothing I'm pushing personally. This is something I'm trying to listen to some of the experts and some of the educators saying additional quality time before Memorial Day weekend is better than additional time in June. I definitely hear I hear the child care issues, and I hear the lost revenue. That's something that we'll have to consider. I mean, everybody, I know the folks at this table, we all have to deal with child care issues, not just during the summer, but the entire year. Thank God I'm slightly past that stage, but we're all very well aware of that, and we've all had to deal with it ourselves. So we're going to have a deeper discussion. I didn't want any of the teachers to leave this room thinking this board doesn't doesn't recognize how hard you're working, and I don't want you to think that we've ever talked about mid-August. We're talking about 1 week shift. So there's 4 weeks in August. Currently we're in the 4th week. We're shifting it to the 3rd week, not the 1st or the 2nd. So
there's actually 5 weeks in August next year, 2022. So it's actually the 4th week of August that you're even talking about at the very earliest. So
right.
The 22nd of August next 2022 is the 4th week of August.
Right, it's the 4th week in August.
Correct.
August 22nd.
Correct.
Okay. So keep it in mind.
That's the week that is even being discussed. It is the 4th week of August. So.
And we've been, I mean, if for nothing else, we've been doing it this way for 125 years. Can you just, maybe we just give it 1 year. 1 year of a calendar shift. And if the wheels fall off and it's a disaster, as you're all claiming that it very well may be, then let's shift back. But we've had 125 years of one. We have a lot of people telling us that the shift and others, we're really out on an island. New York, New Jersey are out on an island in our late start date. And I understand it's part of our culture. I get it. I can't even believe that Ann, Michelle, and I are somewhat advocating because nobody likes summer more than us. I've been trying to tell Mike to start the school year the first Monday in October and follow the Supreme Court calendar, but he refuses. But how long have I been saying that to you? But Mike, I'm going to pass it back to you. I know you want to say something. These are dialogues that we can have in deeper discussion as part of board. I didn't want anybody in this room to think this board is not supportive of the teachers, so that's just not the case, and it's not mid-August. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, you took the wind out of my sails a little bit. I mean, the two things that I can state unequivocally are that one, consideration will be given to the concerns that teachers bring, and two, you will have a seat at the table with me, Betsy and Laura I'm speaking to directly, in terms of discussing those concerns and trying to work through any issues that need to be worked through either creatively or just in ways that we're not accustomed to working through before. And as you both know, there are a number of districts in New Jersey who have already gone down this road. Like Ms. Weber said, we're in a minority in terms of the nation with regard to start date. But we can discuss and collaborate and I think creatively address a number of the issues that were touched on tonight. Maybe not all of them, but a number of them for sure.
Great. So in the interest of time, we're going to just quickly go through the agenda. Again, these are posted on Friday, so if it appears that we go through them quickly, we'll try and discuss the calendar during board business, but please don't feel compelled to stay. I know, again, you're also on your 18th hour, so don't worry about us. So moving over to personnel, Ann?
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A14 on the regular agenda.
I'll second it.
Does anybody have questions on the personnel items, either for Dr. LaSousa or Ann or Ms. Grant? No questions? No comments? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Duly noted, a 1 to 14, pass 8-0.
Excellent, thank you. Moving over to finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan, do you mind moving those along? Matt, you want to move finance and facilities? We did, I did it differently, just in the interest of time, sorry. You voted, you were in favor. You left. You seconded it, in fact.
Yes, let's move action items B1 to B11.
Second.
One, thank you. Question one, to the description of the nation of a fencing scoring machine.
Oh, nice.
Thanks.
Hunter
Hunter
Stesnick.
Stesnick?
Oh, Hunter Stesnick, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now you can hear my vote. Thank you to Hunter Stesnick for donating a fencing scoring machine. Not to be outdone, it's a Leon Paul 3-weapon wireless fencing scoring machine.
Very nice.
He's the cousin of Les Paul from
The lesser known cousin.
from Guitarland.
And just as a side note, Hunter was one of the founding students who advocated to start a fencing club. I think he's graduated now from college, so it's nice to see him giving back. That's also nice to see. But he was one of the founding members, along with one of his classmates, Jake Burns, starting the fencing club. And I think it's like 60 people strong now, or 60 to 80 members. It's one of our most successful athletic events. Any additional questions or comments on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent, thank you.
Duly noted, passes 8-0.
Sorry, thank you, Peter. I'm just going quickly so we can get folks home.
Yes, I'd like to move action items C1 to C4 for vote.
Second?
And again, just to point out that one item is the calendar for this upcoming school year, starting on August 30th and ending a week later in June. Mike, was there any discussion with any of the teaching staff to move the graduation from Friday to Thursday, or you haven't gotten there yet?
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, well, let's approve it as is, and if there's if the staff wanted that moved off of Friday, and again, maybe they're not concerned at all. One year it was on a Friday, and some teachers had concerns, and it intersects with the Sabbath, so, I mean, I have no concerns if they have no concerns. I just don't want to ignore if there are, so let us know. Okay, any additional questions on curriculum?
C4 is the change in the math curriculum for
Yeah, the
because it's
program
program of studies. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Duly noted, C1 to 4, passes 8-0.
Excellent. Policy and procedures?
Nothing to move on policy.
Nothing. No audibles? Okay, excellent. So we're up to our point in board business. We talked a little bit about the calendar. I'll leave it up to the board. Do you want to have additional discussions in the committee? Do you want to, the question is, do we, continue discussions or ask Mike to put calendars together for an August 20, you looked at the calendar, right? So it would be August 22nd of, right. 2022, 2023 school year. This gives folks 18 months, or so to plan. But again, Bradley, you're a little newer to the board. We've been talking about the benefits of shifting the school year to give additional instructional time, all before Memorial Day weekend. A lot of times people say, oh, it's, after Memorial Day weekend, it's very difficult to keep the kids engaged, and toward the end of the year it starts to trail off. And that will happen naturally, in any given year, but the goal is to shift it a week. And from what we've heard at other presentations, that we are somewhat behind the curve on this one nationally, and it's a bit of an anomaly that New York, New Jersey start as late as they do. So the conversation is, do we forge ahead and ask Mike to put together some calendars or this calendar that everybody voted on, 3C, with the option of moving it a week earlier, like we had planned this year? Or is any of the board members, want to discuss not moving it earlier?
I do have a question, and Mike, you probably have these statistics, but how many other districts, like within driving distance of here, that potentially any of our staff may have kids in districts, have made this change? In other words, do we have an idea of how many staff members this would potentially conflict with who have school-age children that would not be starting school at the same time or close to the same time?
I couldn't give you a number of staff. The districts that I know of course, are Mendham and Central, where we saw the presentation there, and all of their feeder districts begin early too, to align with them. So that's Long Valley, Chester, Mendham Borough, Mendham Township. I'm pretty sure North Hunterdon and some of the schools out towards Hunterdon County begin early. So I couldn't tell you more than that, though, right off the top of my head.
I think that's something that we should, I'm not saying change it, I'm just saying I think that's something we should discuss, only because, Michelle is the perfect example of somebody teaching in another district and having kids in one district teaching in another district. And, I'm not concerned about shortened vacations because you're still getting vacation in June per se, but I do think when it comes to staff coming back and their kids not going back to school for potentially a couple of weeks later, that it's something we should
But how do we handle that for February break? Like, a lot of school districts had February break off, but then we didn't. And April break, our April break could be, any week in April, and so can all the other districts. So
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
can speak to that, because as long as I've been a teacher, it's like a shooting star that my breaks would line up with my kids. So that's a part of my job. Like, I knew, I teach in a different district, therefore I can't ask them to change the Chatham district because my kids go there. That's just part of what it is. But as long as I have been teaching, I have started school around the time that my kids have started school. And especially when my kids were younger, that alleviated the burden of me having to not be with them, and paying childcare and whatever. And I think we need to listen to our teachers. I think we need to really decide how important is 1 week. And I'm not weighing in my decision, what I think is the best decision academically, or we're talking about 5 academic days. So we need to decide what is, and I think our teachers are the backbone of our district, right? And they always have been. So I just think we need to listen, we need to bring them to the table, we need to really share these concerns. What are the financial implications for teachers? And I don't think we can minimize that, because when you think of someone who's banking on certain summer income, that is very important to them. We have to make sure that we're not. And we have time to talk. We don't have to rush this next month. We had to get this one, but I think we need to have these conversations. And then we also, if there is leading research and experts in the field that really feel that this is the best route in terms of education and what's trending, then I think we need to get those experts here. And we need to educate our community and our teachers. I think for us, relaying information, it gets lost in translation. And there is data that supports this, and there is research, and I think it needs to be heard. I also think the timing of this is not good. I think everybody's really tired. Our teachers, our staff, they're working under really, really trying circumstances. So I think having these conversations right now are going to be really tricky. That's all. So I think we need to deal with this calendar. We set it for 21, 22. And then I think we really need to talk about the next calendar and what we do want it to look like. And if we want to push it to that 22nd of August, let's put the information out why. And let's get the experts to have the conversation, not just with us, but with our teachers, with our community. And even if we have to set up a virtual event to communicate that and educate people, I think it's important we do so. That's just my 2 cents.
Mike, can I make one quick comment? How easy is it for you to liaise with other superintendents? Call it Northern Jersey. Is there any efficiency to the bureaucracy of Northern Jersey so that something could be done or try to be orchestrated in a coordinated fashion so that all the school districts in this 100-mile area kind of get on the same page with their calendars?
Well, it's easy for me to liaise with lots of other superintendents in North Jersey, but it's impossible to get people moving in the same direction and on the same page because they all have different boards, they all have different opinions, they all have different teachers associations. The sacred line was always Labor Day. Schools never began before Labor Day. It was written into many contracts, teacher contracts between boards of education and teachers associations that the school year was from September 1 to June 30. And what precipitated more districts moving pre-Labor Day was a change at West Morris Central, West Morris Mendham, and that ultimately went to PERC, and I forget what court, I think it was PERC that decided it. But they determined that the Board of Education has the authority to unilaterally change the start date and determine the work year. Not the number of days in the work year, but when the work year occurs is something that the Board of Education has the authority, or the administration has the authority to do. And that led to pre-Labor Day starts. So, I would venture to say that 10 years ago you couldn't find a district in New Jersey that began the year before September 1st, not even for teachers. And now I would say many, many, many districts have got their teachers at least coming in before Labor Day, and in some cases, or in a number of cases, they've got their students starting, before Labor Day. So I think one of the reasons why some of the teachers mentioned mid-August was when the calendar we were originally discussing last time had August 23rd as the start date. That was a Monday, if I'm not mistaken. There were 2 professional development days the week before. That was August 17th and 18th, or 16th and 17th. So that would be, that would constitute mid-August from their point of view. So moving before Labor Day doesn't mean you have to go all the way to August 22nd. Like, I'm looking at the calendar now. Labor Day is the 5th. So the week leading up to Labor Day is August 29th to September 2nd. The week before, though, starting on a Thursday would be August 25th, and we could do the teacher days before that. That would be not quite mid-August. I'm not saying that that's the calendar. We haven't drawn up, all of the calendars and considered this feedback yet. But my point is only to say that it's not after Labor Day or 2 weeks before Labor Day. There are a lot of days in between that could make sense and could try to accommodate some of the concerns that we heard, but also get to the goal of beginning the year earlier so that we're ending it earlier on the other end.
Yeah, so I agree with what you had said earlier, Mike, with the teachers union, and I just think we do need to have some more discussions about it. I think we need to think about their feedback. I think we need to really weigh all of the options. I mean, as Michelle said, the schools aren't running without the teachers, so we're not in the classroom. I just think it's a difficult decision for us to make without weighing the negative effects on our teachers. So I think we need to just
I should mention too that the presentation that we got to see down in Atlantic City at school boards last year by the West Morris superintendent, that one of the takeaways that he gave all of us was that it improved student stress levels and the well-being of students because they had more time in the beginning of the year with counselors and with others before the college application admissions process and all of that, and that they reported, students were reporting that the earlier start was helpful to them. So that was just something interesting. And again, we've been talking about inviting him in to do a presentation. They had a board meeting tonight also. So it's been hard to align the schedules, but it was interesting hearing his rationale for sure.
Another thing he said that was interesting is that it was not well received the first year, and then the subsequent years everybody's like, oh yeah, no, this definitely works better, and all of the other sending districts switched to match because he's a a high school only district. And then the second year, it was very well received, which is sort of my point too. You know, like you said, we don't have to back it all the way up to the 22nd. We can maybe make it the 25th. But let's try it. We've been doing it one way for 125 years. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, and I definitely want you to talk to Laura and Betsy, and you know, that is their seat at the table. So maybe as just a way to move forward, maybe Mike, you can have a meeting with Betsy and Laura, and then maybe for our next meeting, put together a draft calendar of what 22, 23 would look like. Again, and we're just talking about, you know, the 22nd, the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th, you know, just so we have it in front of us. Again, I don't think it has to be, you know, an extreme in either direction, but we want to start moving toward that earlier start date because of the merits. And I'd like folks to try it for 1 year. And again, if the wheels fall off and it's a miserable failure, we go back. I just feel like 125 years in one direction is, you know, is good proof, and let's give it 1 year. But again, this is not the Joe Weber show, and if the recommendation from the educators is that, you know, we keep it at the 29th of August, then so be it. Is everybody okay with that, Mike, Michael Lisusa creating a draft for discussion at the next meeting, what it would look like? Who's good with that? Okay, excellent. Okay, so again, all of this dialogue is 2022, 2023, not September of this year or August of this year. Any additional board business anybody would like to discuss? No? Okay, we have our second opportunity for public commentary, and just if I can just mention to the boards, we have a brief executive session right after, and we'll meet in the band room where we could spread out. So second opportunity for public commentary.
I'll sign in after, so I don't waste anybody's time. Before I address the board as to the comments I intended to speak about,
Would you mind introducing yourself? I know who you are.
My name is Bonnie Press.
Thank you, Dr. Press.
I just wanted to briefly comment on COVID in our school district. I work on the COVID floors at our hospital, and I'm proud to serve on numerous committees that make decisions about how we manage COVID at Atlantic Health. And so from my personal vantage point, I just wanted to say that when I look at how my district and my board and my superintendent have handled COVID, I am sincerely and completely impressed. You can't make everybody happy all the time, and I know the decisions are difficult. But Dr. Lisusa, your emails have been transparent. They've been informative. I always knew where my children stand. I sometimes wonder whether our next day is going to be virtual or not, but I have to say I think you've all done a wonderful job, and I thank you for that. My children are learning, and they are safe. I would also say that CPAG has created a link on our website, as we do support teachers getting vaccinated. So if they are interested in advocating to our state, they can go to our website and do that. I know it's not Algebra 2, but we believe that protecting our teachers equals protecting our kids. That said, I'm here on behalf of CPAG to speak in follow-up to our written request to include a member of CPAG on the hiring committee for our new assistant superintendent for special services. I realize that CPAG represents the special education families, but this position really is going to intersect with the general education population as well. This would include basic skills, bullying policies, mental health, dyslexia screening, programming. And you realize the mission of CPAG is defined by the New Jersey DOE is to serve as a voice and as an advisor to our district when it relates to our special education children. We're in fact part of the district, and just as Dr. Lisusa sets policies and procedures, he sets the tone for all that happens within the district. When I looked at the job description for the assistant superintendent, I can't see a more pervading or direct influence than this position would have on our families. Now, there is precedent for CPEG participating in the hiring committees in other comparable communities, Basking Ridge, Vernon Township, Montclair. In fact, Madison had two CPEG members on their advisory committees. We also have precedent in our own school district. I believe Miranda Cogswell sat on the committee to hire Dr. Tariff, who preceded Dr. D'Elia, and Emily Lajeunesse sat on the committee to hire Dr. Vince D'Elia. Now these entities have been able to navigate issues of privacy and follow the procedures, so I don't see why that might be an encumbrance to CPEG participating in this hire. The Chatham parents have asked that a CPEG participate in the process. In fact, last week we created a petition and we have amassed over 500 signatures of Chatham residents who support this initiative. So in conclusion, I'd like to once again request that a member of CPEG be placed on the hiring committee for the Assistant Superintendent of Special Services. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Press. Any additional public comments before we close the public comment session? Nope, seeing none? Okay, excellent. So just to comment on that, we did meet on personnel, so that was, I'm glad Dr. Press brought that up. We did meet on personnel, and we've decided to continue with the committee structure where 2 personnel members sit on it. Part of that had to do with privacy. Part of it had to do with, I'm looking around the table, every single member at this table has had experience with special education. That's not been the case, but in this instance, this entire board has experience with special education. It is not really sustainable. While I don't think CPAG has a vested interest, they certainly do, but so do other committees or structures, and our primary overarching concern was somewhat privacy. Not that anybody would be unethical, but there's nothing binding an individual from the community in their actions once they leave the room. So I can envision a scenario where you might love a candidate, oh my gosh, and you go home and you Twitter, I love John Jones, he's great. Well, John Jones really was just doing exploratory and he had no intention of leaving his district, and you've just ruined John Jones's career. But more importantly, the onus is on the board, the onus is on the administration to do the due diligence, to go through the efforts, not to say we don't hear your concerns, not to say we don't know your push on reading, and we can continue all of those dialogues, and that's fantastic. But I think the goal, and if the board wants to chime in, the decision was to pick 2 members of the board to sit on the committee and take input from the entire board, since we have every member of this board has experience with special ed, and Ann, who's the committee chair of personnel and who has done the majority of these committee hires, and Lotta, who is the senior most member of the board. Lotta and Matt are the 2 most senior members, so I think you're going to sit in on those sessions. Just the same token, I wouldn't have the president of the athletic booster sit in on the athletic hire. I wouldn't recommend having the president of the book club sit in on an English hire. We're bound by ethics, we're bound by there's consequences if we break the law. There's consequences if a teacher, violates confidentiality. So there's absolute consequences. And we did, I know your survey was sent out in all good faith, with no ill intention, but we also received emails that they were upset that you used the entire directory unsolicited and sent out emails. So again, I know there was no intent, but there's also the other side of that argument that they were not thrilled. They didn't want to be represented, and I understand you collected 500 and some odd signatures, and I understand where CPAG is coming from, and I acknowledge that you'll probably be disappointed at that decision, but unless the board decides to change directions, I think that's how we're going to forge ahead. I'm going to put my mic down. If somebody else wants to weigh in, feel free. Well, thank you, Dr. Presto. I do appreciate you bringing that up and giving us the opportunity, and I do acknowledge that you're disappointed with that decision, so thank you. Okay, so this closes the public session. We do have a quick executive session. No action will be taken, but if we could just gather in the band room for a few minutes.